All right, welcome back to the Rack Pack. We are a modular synthesizer podcast. We have a very special guest today. We're going to get into that. But first, I want to introduce the Rack, and we're going to do something slightly different today. We're going to use our actual real names because we realized we just felt silly using our alternate names. I don't know why we did that. But I'm Jonas, and we have also with us today Stu.
Hey, nice to see you.
Formerly Stu J. And
at least your name is somewhat close to your name.
Formerly Moonbase Alpha, it's Jeffy.
Hey, everybody.
All right.
It's Moonbase Theta.
So Stu's going to introduce our guest today.
So I'm really thrilled. And we will likely have Synth Dad join us a bit late today. But I am really thrilled to introduce our guest today. His name is Jay Hosking. If you haven't heard of him, I suspect you have. I'm going to give you a brief introduction. I'm going to start with the kind of the non-musical aspect of Jay. He's a dad and a great guy. We'll start there. But he's also not just like our own Jonas. He's a neuroscientist. He got his BSc in neuroscience at the University of Toronto, graduating with high distinction. He got a PhD in neuroscience at the University of British Columbia, did a postdoctoral fellowship at Harvard University, and he teaches neuroscience, which is just extraordinary to me, especially given his output, his musical output, and his synth video output. Jay, I discovered him about 5 years ago because I saw, oh, wow, here's a guy using, I think it was a matriarch at the time. And I thought, I have a matriarch and I'm just getting into my matriarch. And I quickly came to realize that, I respect so many of the synth video creators, the synthfluencers, but Jay, I think for me, more than any of them, I go to his YouTubes just to listen to the music. I go to his Bandcamp just to listen to the music. His music is that good that I forget about the gear. But I don't forget about it completely because over the years, either directly because of Jay or because Jay was the straw that broke the camel's back for me, I have bought the following things within minutes after watching one or more Jay Hosking videos. Now, I haven't necessarily kept them all. We could talk about that if we want to. But Octatrack, Walrus Slower, Mini Moog Model D. Thanks, Jay. I think it's Addictive Drums 2, Elta Solar 42, the Vic X Forge Time, and we'll talk about Jay's impact on sales of that module. Dreadbox Nymphas. I've got Dreadbox Artemis on the brain. Haven't bought it, but when they're back in stock in February, I think I know what's going to happen.
Me too.
Torso T1, Ableton Push, at Tasty Chips GR1. That was just kind of a cursory overview of the gear I've spent. What I didn't do is go through the cost of all of those. But Jay, I gotta say, you've brought a lot of joy to me. You really. I always think to myself, if I'm questioning a device, Jay tends to be the one who'll pull something magical out of it, and I react accordingly, for better or worse. Looking, behind me and at my wallet. So just thrilled to have you, Jay. And why don't we start because. We are a Eurorack focused podcast, and you're not an exclusively Eurorack guy. No. It's possible some folks in our audience might not have heard of you before, and we don't typically start with tell us about your life and how you came to this stuff. But I think with you, we'd like to do that if you would indulge us. And for those of you who've watched a Jay Hosking video, you get that joke.
Oh, Stu, thank you for having me. Jonas, Jeffy, it's really good to see you. And I'm happy and excited to be here. Where should I, this is hilarious. One, I'm thinking of just if you took all those pieces of gear that you bought and then turned them into a car, I just basically saved you a bunch of car, repairs and things. Hopefully.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Sure.
Where can I start you in terms of the Eurorack stuff? Is there something I can specifically sort of?
Yeah, I'm interested.
Can I interrupt? Because I think we have to go back further here because, I have, I'm very excited to talk to someone who also has this intersection of neuroscience and synth interests, and which actually came first. I mean, where do we need to start? Were you a scientist first, or were you a musician first, or like where does the history come?
Yeah, I would say I was a musician first. So not a very good one, but I started doing piano when I was about 9 years old. I was always interested in music, more on the like pulling a song out of the ether. Like I've always loved the idea of songwriting, that somehow you can sit in front of something and draw something out that doesn't exist and has never existed from materials that have always existed. So that was always, I always wanted to compose. And I didn't have much luck on piano. And then I picked up guitar as a teenager, and that was really where I started to figure it out. So I was mainly a guitar guy, but I always, like I grew up with, I don't know, the soundtracks of the 80s, Tangerine Dream, and I don't know what else. Video game, like early NES music, The Legend of Zelda or Dragon Warrior. These are like, these were the sort of sounds and the timbres of my childhood as well. So I was always interested in synths, but I became a guitar guy for years and years. And I was sort of not very, very actively not a science person. The clues were there. Like I was the kind of kid who really loved watching the Surgery Channel. Do you guys have a Surgery Channel in the United States? I love the Surgery Channel.
I don't know if we have a channel for it, but I definitely happened upon that a surgery.
I'm still really into it. My kid is 9. He told me last week he wants to be a surgeon, which I thought was awesome. But I was like, yeah, now we can start watching. We can start watching the surgery. But anyway, the clues were there, but I was sort of very much an arts kid, and then came to science much later. I was actually working out in the field in television and film, actually. So, and then realized that it wasn't the right space for me, and then looked backward and sort of realized a lot of what I was interested in was science related, and then went back for science. Music was still happening then, but definitely a big change. And then really this whole new push, as many of you will know, is really came with having a kid, right? Like not being able to have a bunch of amplifiers that are cranked up all the time and having to make music predominantly through headphones. That was where a lot of my return to hardware. Oh, also having a job where I could afford things. That was a big difference as helps. Well. Yeah,
for sure.
So that was the real return to hardware.
That is a key component.
By the way, before I forget, I was remiss. I didn't mention a couple things in the intro. You can find Jay's YouTube at Jay Hosking, @JayHosking, and we'll provide links on the podcast. I should also mention that Jay's got a Patreon with one of the greatest Discords. It's just such a lovely community that he's fostered. Highly recommend you check it out and support Jay if you can. And finally, I forgot to mention that yesterday I bought the Walrus She pedal because I had a credit at Perfect Circuit, and I just watched every video you've done with that pedal and literally bought it yesterday. So there's
credit burning a hole in your pocket.
Just for completeness of the list there, we got it.
I've got a neuroscience question for you.
Sure.
What do you think it is? What do you think draws a musician to something like Eurorack or old school synths with patch cables? What is it about the brain? Why would somebody be perfectly? No, really. What do you think is the difference neurologically between someone who's just really happy using a laptop and someone who goes down the weeds? What is it satisfying? What's going on there?
Yeah, I don't know if I can answer this as a neuroscientist. Maybe Jonas has got a better answer here, but I can answer it as a psychologist. I guess what I'm trying to say is that if you want to study waves, you don't necessarily study individual molecules of water, right? Like H2O itself isn't necessarily going to tell you about the tides. There are these emergent properties that come out that are sometimes better described at one level than another. But psychologically, like, why are we drawn to things like hardware? I think that a lot of what we get, and again, Jonas can probably lay into this a lot further, is this: we love sensory motor feedback loops. We love when we sense a thing and then we respond to that thing and we sense the thing like give us feedback to our movements. And there's this very, very tight integration between turning turning a parameter knob or pushing a slider and the immediate auditory feedback that you get. I think for me, that's the the most immensely satisfying part. So devices that are hardware but have minimal physical way to interact with them, I tend to find them not nearly as appealing, and I don't nearly get as lost in the flow with them, right? I really want to learn the sort of the topography of an instrument so that I can very, very quickly feel that sensory motor feedback. So I would honestly say that sensory motor feedback is the main thing. But Jonas, do you have anything you would want to contribute to this?
I think that's really well said. I mean, the sensory and motor systems in the brain are tightly integrated. Like as you use the word sensory motor there, it's one thing, and the brain is built to explore the physical environment and to encode everything we interact with, both from its motor side and its sensory side. And so it's definitely a much more natural thing for the brain to cope with a physical thing that we can yank on, as opposed to like a virtual thing where we have to do some kind of abstract translation between where our mouse is on the screen and what that thing is.
Yeah.
I remember when I was a kid, science was never my favorite subject. But when I was in elementary school, my first, second, third grade, they must still have them. But at the time, my dad went to a store known as Radio Shack here in the United States, which is now out of business. And they sold these kits, and they were called 25 in 1, 50 in 1, 100 in 1. And you'd bring it home, and it would have this layout, come with a bunch of wires and plugs and LEDs. And then it had a little easy to follow along book for children. Like, here's how to make the light up. Here's how to make a transistor radio, and you follow the instructions and patch the cables, and this magic would happen. And I remember I absolutely loved that, and then completely forgot that they ever existed until about 9 years ago. I stepped into Perfect Circuit for the first time and did some patching on a Moog Mother 32, and I was like, oh wow! It just tapped into that childhood sense of wonder and play and discovery. So, that's what it was for me. As for what part of the brain gets activated, I have no idea, but I was just curious about it.
Okay, well, I have a really nerdy neuroscience thought. Maybe this is the time to ask it, since you did bring up the brain, Stu. And I know we're generally okay getting nerdy about stuff on this podcast. I'm a little bit worried that this might go too far here into the wrong kind of nerdy. But I have a question for Jay, because this whole thing with the patch cables and connecting things up, there is an analogy there to the way the brain works, right? The brain has these cables that connect everything, and I wonder if you've thought about this analogy and to what extent you have between a sort of Eurorack system and the brain. There's been this kind of debate over the history of neuroscience as to how modular the brain is. Is it made up of little individual units that are all separate from each other and each do a specialized thing and are connected, or is it just kind of a big jumble of wires where everything can influence everything else? I mean, is that something you think about?
I do think about it a lot. Yeah. So I'm a systems neuroscientist by training, which for Stu and Jeffy essentially means that we look at a larger scale than, say, individual neurons or circuits. We're looking at, for example, how the amygdala affects the prefrontal cortex, or how the prefrontal cortex affects the basal ganglia, and so on, right? So all these sort of, brain areas talking to one another, or forming sort of larger scale circuits rather than the microcircuits. But yeah, I think about the modular side all the time. I do think that probably you feel the same way, Jonas. The answer is both. Of course, the brain has tons of modularity. We don't have one, to go back to our sensory motor stuff, we don't have one sensory system. We have systems built on systems. We have systems in our midbrain that are processing sensory information that we have no conscious awareness of or access to. It's what causes our eyes to move when we see a flashing light or when we hear a loud sound or something like that. And then we have systems built on top of that. And same with our motor systems. We have systems on systems on systems. And they're each playing a role, but there is a gestalt. There is a whole that's greater than the sum of its parts. And that's what Eurorack is. That's what your skiff is, right? Like everybody has take your pick. Everybody has a beads, or everybody has a bloom, or everybody has a, take your thing that everybody's using these days, the Forge TME VIC-X, right? Something like that. But what you get out of it is a very different product because it is modular, but also it's gestalt. It's that whole large scale sort of organization. So I definitely do think about this parallel quite a bit, actually. Yeah.
Right.
You mentioned, it's interesting. I think there's also a metaphor as far as sensory overload is concerned, our brains and the amount of gear we use, which I have a very large system. Jay, I know I rarely see all of your gear in one place at one time, but I expect you have a ton of gear. But you've got, but then you've done some really interesting things, which I think speaks to this. Like, I know that I was much more musically productive when I had less stuff. When I had no more than a partially filled 104 HP 6U case. No, it was a 7U make noise case. I was far more creative. I'm trying to recapture that. And one thing you've done is you came up, I don't know if you'd call it a rule, but you tend to have no more than, is it 3 boxes in a setup at a given time? Okay. But then even your use of Eurorack, you'll do an entire ambient album with a tiny little portable IntelliGel case, or your work with, I never get it straight, is it the Forge TME by VicX, or is it the VicX by Forge TME? Okay. They're not doing us any favors. They really just horrifying. I can never spell it either when I'm trying to Google it. But you made an entire album with what was Pam's new workout and that module essentially. And suddenly this thing sold out globally. It was doing well before then, but really your video, I think, pushed it, made it unobtainium for a time. So would you talk a little bit about how shrinking the number of boxes or using smaller systems, what's that experience been like for you? And do you think you're going to stick with that? Do you ever just light it all up? I call it lighting it up when...
So I have a lot to say on this. I talk a lot about this with the Patreon community, especially on that Discord you mentioned, Stu, which I agree is like my favorite place on the internet. I'm very, very lucky that it's quite self-selecting, and a certain type of person wants to spend their time in a very pro-social environment talking about this stuff, which is great. But yeah, my main... This is, again, Jonas knows all about this. This goes back to the work of Barry Schwartz, who is doing psychology of choice and psychology of options. And what we find is that we humans are not very good at having too many options, too many choices, and especially some of us more than others, right? There's this, his dichotomy, Schwartz's dichotomy is this idea of so-called maximizers and satisficers. So maximizers are people who have to examine each of the possible options individually and then choose the single best option. And then satisficers are people who have a set of criteria, and as soon as those criteria are met, they select that, and that's the end. So I'm very much in my life a satisficer, which is, in general, satisficers tend to be happier and tend to have less decision regret. But interestingly, the maximizers are the people who, on average, tend to make the bigger life decisions better, and strangely also tend to live with a lot more decision regret and unhappiness about their choices, even though they're making the more methodical choice. Anyway, so I just embrace this satisficing in terms of my setup. I don't, I love it, Stu, but I refer to what you've got behind you as the synth museum, right? Like, it's wonderful, but a lot of us have gotten stuck in the trap of like, I'm just going to set it all up, and then I'm going to wire it all up, and then it'll be ready to go. But you know this, it's never done. It's never going to be over. And once it's all set up, then you're going to be like, okay, now what do I do? Well, how do I, you just got so much in front of you.
I mean, the punchline for me is I've got this nice room. It's dedicated to my synths. I'm sitting at a beautiful music desk that a buddy of mine made by hand for me. Mm-hmm. And the great innovation for me occurred about 2 weeks ago when I got a cheap rolling little table. Because I share this room with a parrot at night. It makes things difficult.
Yeah.
So what I do now is I take 2, maybe 3 boxes, and I put them on that rolling table.
Good.
And I go into the living room while the family's asleep, and I actually have been productive. I've been learning things. I've been making music again, because ironically, I kind of can't make music in this room that's full of so many choices, which is
check things out of the library.
Really sad in a way.
All
but
this,
maybe it's not. I don't know.
I'm the same way,
storage.
Stu. These are all shelves, right? So I put a lot of my gear is just stacked away on shelves. You can see a bucket right behind there that's just full. That one, there's the delay pedal bucket, and right next to it over here is the reverb bucket. Literally a bucket of pedals. It's like. So that's sort of the part of it is like fewer options, but also I tend to like to start from a blank canvas, like your rolling table. Your rolling table is exactly, so I've got this just in front of me, this white table, which is what I use for most of my videos. It is a finite size. If I cannot fit the gear on that table, then I have gone too far is the general story. So, when I'm creating a setup, it's got to fit on the table. That means that all my gear sort of, in a sense, is constraining the choices. And then the final sort of part of this is, exactly what you mentioned. With Eurorack, I find at the beginning, I was really a miser for HP. I just was like, give me the most function in the smallest HP. And now I find that it's miserable to work on, and just looking at, you're looking at a screen door of wires on top of it, right? Like now I'm a really big fan of stuff that's very, very clean and has like a lot of space. So that one, someone watching can figure out what I'm doing, but two, so that I can see the parameter knobs, right? I'm not just staring at a bunch of spaghetti and wiring my hand or maneuvering my hand between the cables. Yeah. But I do think that like, starting with nothing and then adding a piece at a time can really help. Did anybody here ever use Reason? The
I used
DAW?
Reason for a long time.
Yeah. So you know that feeling where you take it out of the one area and you slide it into the rack? That's like, that was before I had money and I had gear. That was my dream of like, I would love to be able to just put stuff into the setup, right? And so I've definitely embodied that. So maybe Reason should get a lot of credit as well. Great DAW. I still use it all the time. It's my main recording software, even still.
I really love it too. Huh. Jeffy, why were you laughing when he was describing the maximizer?
I have no comment at this time. No, I mean, I kind of embody the maximizer philosophy, but I'm definitely in a kind of a place with Eurorack where I have too much of it, and so the only way I've been productive with Eurorack lately is I have a bunch of small cases now.
Yes, the small case.
I've got two massive cases, but it's the small cases where I actually get stuff done.
100%. Same here. There were, what was there, Stu? Maybe a couple of years where I just didn't touch Eurorack at all, or a year and a half or something, and then came back to it with a bunch of small cases, and that was when it clicked for me.
Man, I don't know. I think this qualifies as a large case, this one behind me, but it's not too large. Like,
what makes
you say that?
It does.
I like it because it's not that big and I can still reach everything, and it's like right there in front of me. I think if it was any bigger, it would bother me. But I do have other stuff around here on the floor. You know, there's a like it's too bad Synthad's not here with us today because he's got this beautiful like library.
He's going to try to join.
Okay. He's got this library situation, which is like this shelving system for this Eurorack he's not using that he can then just like pull stuff out and put in these little cases, which I think is a really nice way to go about it.
Yeah.
A friend of mine just suggested to get some like architecture drawing drawers and then, put all your rack modules in, and you can just pull out a drawer.
Honestly, a great idea. Yeah, I do something similar again with for example, I can just slide out right here, and I've got like a drum machine, right? Like it's just ready to go. I love that idea personally. Yeah.
Robert Pabst, better known as Cinematic Laboratory. I don't know, Jay, if you're familiar with his work. Definitely. He did a studio tour when he moved into a new space, and it was there. I absolutely adore his videos, but there are two things that always kind of bother me about them. And by the way, I've reached out to him this morning to try to get him as a guest.
Awesome. Great.
First of all, he never screws the modules into the case. so you see them wiggling because he's constantly switching them out so much. Yeah. But then when he did that studio tour, his modules, and he's got thousands of them, they're just in bins piled on top of each other.
It's so terrifying.
It hurt my soul. But the reason I raise the subject of Cinematic Laboratory is he dropped a video yesterday, and it was a very solemn and almost upsetting video about how he's losing
the death of Eurorack.
Well, kind of for him, of course, for him, sure, but something about it resonated with me. And Jay, I'm curious to get your take on this question, which is, the thesis he proposed is that we're at a point of saturation. There's really nothing new or better, just more complex and probably worse, with a few exceptions. And he showed the Vic Forge, whatever we're calling that thing.
It's Vic X.
He showed that as an example of something great that's new and that's come out, but then seemed to be suggesting that it's just a lot of functionality being jammed into more modern digital modules, and kind of pointed to Buchla and Surge and older Make Noise as an example of things that he feels still has the magic because they were made at a time when it was new and people were dreaming. And there was just more of a sense of wonder. And I'm just curious to get your sense of, just a small question. Existentially, where's it all going, Jay? We're a Eurorack focused podcast. I'm just curious to get your sense of it.
I think with the last 10 years, basically, Arturia, I would kind of give credit as starting this whole revitalization of the idea of hardware, especially analog hardware, right? Their Mini Freak. I mean, the Volcos too were a really, really big part of this transition back to hardware, and they were a great price point for many of us to get back to it, right? So I think that what we've been doing since the Mini Freak, I guess that's longer, it's like 15 years, something like that, is we have been creating the gear of our imagination, right? This analog synthesizers that stay in tune, that don't detune as soon as your room changes temperature. Polyphonic synthesizers that we can, one, afford, and sometimes even to have amazing effects in them, like the Polybrute or something like that. Eurorack cases where every sort of idea can be realized, whether it's Car Plus Strong or really, really interesting delay and looping or something, like the VicX. Actually, I'm going to talk about the VicX again in a second. But ultimately what I think is, even, if you think about the reissue of the Moog Model D, it is like realizing our collective imagination, our collective dream, right? Yeah, I've got mine in the back. It's just behind that glass panel right there. And so I do agree in a sense that we are coming to the edge of that we have more or less fulfilled our collective imagination. But I didn't know I wanted and needed and would love the VicX. I didn't know, like, it wasn't in my imagination. I hadn't imagined that a thing could do what it does, right? And I think that that's really what we're on the cusp of, is not the end of Eurorack or the end of hardware or whatever else, but really the end of what we can predict. And that what we're really going to see is that the most interesting things from here on are going to be things that are outside of the collective imagination. And I would argue that the VicX is that, and that's why it caught me. It's simple. It is an oscillator with a filter and an effects section, but it's an effects section that is uncompromising in what it's doing. Like it deliberately falls into feedback, and the feedback has particular frequencies. The phaser is unwieldy, and like everything about it is very, very curated by an imagination that that doesn't line up with the collective imagination. So I would say that we're a long way from hitting any ceiling. Maybe was he sort of responding to like the fact that there's a tapering off in terms of viewership and things like that? Is that part of what the video is about?
He addressed some annoyances with the algorithm determining who succeeds and who fails. Yeah. But he said in the comments section that he makes his videos for himself.
Yeah, same.
He is doing this I believe in his retirement, and because he loves it. He's doing it out of love. But it struck me that the frustration was less about YouTube and more about, I'm just seeing the same oscillators and
just
filters,
lack of innovation.
And he kind of on the one hand points to the Polymath, the Make Noise NUS system, new universal synthesizer system, as a positive and perhaps a negative as well, saying that he kind of preferred the old Make Noise, but he's going to explore this one, and he points to what was the other one? I'm sorry, I just blanked out on the other thing. But
I want to say one little quick thing, but I know that Jonas and Jeffy have a lot here that I really want to hear about. But the short thing I'm going to say is that part of what our collective imagination is obsessed with right now is this idea of more is more. This idea of, more voices, more effects, more everything stereo, everything does everything. And there's a downside to that, as you know, which is that if everything does everything, then it doesn't do anything particularly, like with a vision, right? I love the aesthetics of the Instro stuff. I love some of the sounds of the Instro design. I don't use the Instro modules because of the fact that all this intro stuff Hey, synth that. I don't use any of the intro stuff because it's all now got a bunch of secondary functions and stacked hidden features, and I can't navigate it. It is not. Remember when I was talking about that sensory motor feedback loop? I shouldn't have to refer to a manual in order to to work with a device.
We've talked about intro at length here. I at one point started to build, and then I'll shut up and let everyone else jump in, but I started to build an all intro system. I decided that's going to be the limitation I set for myself. That's going to be my manufacturer. And almost as soon as I started acquiring their modules, they started getting into, no disrespect, Jason Lim's an absolute genius, a great guy. I love intro. I still have a ton of their stuff. But they started getting to 4HP, and if it's yellow, then it's this. If it's light yellow, it's that. If it's white, it's this. If you hold shift in yellow, it's that.
Yep.
And I just couldn't deal with it anymore. My time is too limited.
Exactly. So I think we're going to see a move away from that. Yeah.
We learned at some point.
Well, now they have this massive.
All of us had bought the
filter.
looper and sold it. All five of us on the podcast had done that, been attracted to that thing. Then
I still have mine.
Oh, you still have yours? Okay.
I still have mine.
But I wanted to comment.
It's not currently racked
On the Cinematic Laboratories video, because I also I found it very poignant and it was emotional. Some of it resonated with me and some of it didn't. I definitely prefer Jay's vision of what's happening. It's much more hopeful. I think one of the things it made me think about is how I very often see people conceptualize their interaction with Eurorack as some kind of a journey. My modular journey is people talk about that, and there is a sort of journey of personal discovery that we all go through when we first encounter it, and there's like an intrigue of it, but a mystery, and then you get into it, and there's like a very steep learning curve, which is very enjoyable for many of us. And I just wonder if Robert has confused some of his personal journey with the journey of the field as a whole. I mean, it's probably hard to distinguish one of those two things in your own kind of experience.
I mean, I've been struggling with some similar issues around Eurorack. I mean, not necessarily lack of innovation. I see plenty of innovation, but the overwhelm that comes from trying most new things that you're interested in, there's no time to go deep enough to really get what someone who creates a piece of hardware, regardless of what you think of their process, they've gone through a process and they've thought the whole thing out. And if you really want to respect that vision, you kind of have to go in at least as deep as they did in terms of use, right? They've thought out the use cases. You're just trying to use it. And if you can't dedicate enough time to explore that vision that they had, part of that, a good chunk of that vision, then you're just doing yourself a disservice, and you're wasting money and stacking gear.
I have sort of given myself permission to not do a good job, right? So I think about the Octatrack. I've made a lot of videos with the Octatrack. It is still, I would say, the single best piece of hardware I've ever used in terms of again, I didn't know, my imagination did not contain this idea that I needed this weird looping, mangling, sampling, performing thing. But the minute I played it, it made such incredible sense to me. But I've never used half of the features on it, 3/4 of the features, right? I've never used it as a proper looper. I've never used it, to do single waveform synthesizer cycles or whatever else. Yeah. So I kind of, you're right, Jeffy. I totally agree that we're doing a disservice by not going into this depth, but also we have to just give ourselves permission to make music and have fun. Really, honestly, at the heart of all this is I have a great life. It's very good, but I got to have some fun. I've got a fun quotient, and I got to meet that fun quotient.
Yes. I totally agree. You do not have to master something to get use out of it, but I do think that there's a sort of a minimum investment that I myself have not made in gear that I have purchased. And then it's well, what do I do?
Yep.
Nowadays, there's stuff that I have that it's arrived that is still in boxes. right? Because now it's like, I'm not going to take it out of the box unless I'm going to put it down and make something with it.
Yep.
It's funny,
So-
the three of
You know,
us.
Jeffy, even you've shrunk up your system, and by that I mean when I see your videos, Jeffy, you're using a minuscule fraction of the gear you've got, and
Yeah.
that seems to have been working for you.
Yeah, I mean, rules give you freedom, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes, like I said with the Eurorack, like there's so much overwhelm if you've got a lot of gear that I've had to like set up little areas where I can do things because the idea of like orchestrating all this stuff, again, in the abstract, it's great, but I recently replaced my mixer, and so I had to unplug a bunch of stuff and plug stuff in, and it's all plugged in, but it's still like, okay, what do I do now?
Yeah.
Like, there's too much stuff. And so, again, this is like an incredible luxury to be able to say that. So
Yeah.
I don't mean to I don't mean to be an asshole about it. But, I think constraints are a good thing.
So
Jay, how do you make?
Sorry, Jonas was trying to get in here, I think.
Oh,
Well,
so
I
sorry.
just
Go
wanted
for
to
it.
bring Synthad into the conversation a little bit. He's joined us here.
Hello.
Synthad, we're talking about large systems versus small systems and paring things down to smaller systems. How have you been living with your with your gear?
On advice of counsel. Hello. I'm sorry I'm late, everybody.
Time change. We didn't realize there was a time
Yes,
change.
our
Sorry.
clocks go back 2 weeks earlier than yours. And of course, I'm thinking
Why?
at 7
Why
p.m.
is
my
that?
time, and it was 6 p.m., and it was all timed exquisitely. Everything was going to be in clockwork until it all fell apart. So apologies for that. Jay,
Yeah,
really
it was
nice
all
to
timed
meet you.
exquisitely, just an hour behind.
An hour apart. I think this is really interesting because despite the fact that there's a very large amount of Eurorack in the cases behind me, if you see many of my videos, like, right here, I build these really small cases because otherwise the point of what you're doing gets lost in the noise in some sense, right? And I find that when I build these very focused small cases, it's forcing me to focus in on the thing that I want to learn or do, be it a module, be it a technique, be it a type of performance. Because I found otherwise you can just get, I can do, and you end up with this overwhelm, much like Moonbase was saying. It's like, hey, I've just done this one thing. Now the ripple effect is 10 other things have to change. So I don't like the whole limitations breed creativity. I think it's too cliched, but I do like the idea of building small islands of functionality or smaller cases to kind of make you really think through what it is you want to do.
So we made an executive decision while you were gone that we're going to start using our real names.
Yeah, we're going to start using our real names.
You don't have to. Actually, you have the best fake name, Synthad. We've actually been naturally just calling you that in your absence, but we're calling Moonbase Jeffy today.
I'm Jeffy now.
But you've always been Jeffy to me.
I always have been, but yeah.
It's always been Jeffy to me. I've been calling you Jeffy throughout.
A few of us saw Tony Rolando yesterday at Perfect Circuit, and he said something that was kind of curious a couple times. He was demonstrating this new universal synthesis system that they have, which is basically a set of modules that go together and work together, and they connect behind the rack to each other and pass signals back and forth. And in a lot of ways, it's like very Eurorack because it allows you to do all of these kinds of strange ways of sequencing things. He said it's not built for somebody who's playing a keyboard. It's built for sending in CV and selecting, indexing channels with voltages and this sort of thing. But he said a couple times that he didn't feel like he was mastering it yet, that he just was kind of getting used to the instrument and had a very specific way of using it. And he said, like, I only know how to do this because I have one of these and you guys don't have one of these yet. And if you had it for a longer amount of time than me, then you get better at it than I would. And so I thought that was a really interesting way of viewing it, in contrast to what Jeffy was saying about a manufacturer having a vision of specifically all the things that this instrument could do and us trying to discover them. That sometimes the manufacturers themselves don't even know what these things are for, apparently.
Yeah, I mean, that feels like an invitation for, exploration with the manufacturer. The manufacturer is almost like providing a platform and a new way of interacting with things.
Yep.
And they're excited to see what people are going to do with it.
I think there might be a bit of a better and worse to that, though, right? Which is, I'm thinking of, for example, Soma Labs, who make some really cool and interesting stuff, but they they just create new stuff really, really quickly. A lot of their ideas are really, really cool. Sometimes they just knock it out of the park. I think that the Cosmos is hands down the best looper I've ever played and it will ever use. Yes, exactly, Stu. That is just like, if I didn't have a YouTube channel, I would just sit around all day with a mild psychoactive substance of my choice and just loop asynchronously, and it would be wonderful. But some of their devices, I feel like they should have just not taken it out of the oven for a little while. They should have sat with it a little bit longer. I'm thinking specifically of the Terra. I think the Terra is amazing, and it sounds beautiful, and the tactile experience of it, Stu, you know this. It's so nice. It gives you such good feedback. And immediately, within, 2 weeks, I was feeling that I was missing something, which is specifically that it feels like it's mainly a one-hand device. Like it's a great solo instrument, but it isn't an instrument like you would play a piano or a guitar, where you are sort of creating what did Beethoven call it, like the little orchestra or something like that, right? So this idea of like it is a part of the band, but it can't be. I feel like the Terra could be a full band with just a little bit of iteration or with a slight rethink. Yeah, so I think that sometimes getting to the ceiling would be more valuable before bringing to market. Yeah,
It's a really interesting point.
It's interesting.
So Jay, I have actually made a Eurorack module now. I've been manufacturing this thing here, and it started out as a VCV rack module.
Yep.
And one of the most valuable things for me was that thousands of people got to use it and tell me what they were using it for. And what I was telling this story yesterday on a panel at the Audio Engineering Society, where when I made the first version of it, I completely forgot to put a reset jack, because I just I never reset my sequences. I just let them run.
Yep.
But I put this thing out there, and everyone's like, "There's no reset. How can I use it?" And you never know like what you're forgetting as a manufacturer. So having all that extra time of people using it and giving feedback allowed for me the thing to mature before it turned into reality. So it's an important.
Doesn't this bring us to the controversial position now? Like and things like Tonewerk are a case in point. On the one hand, we were manufacturers, and I had one.
Literally right there in front of my camera.
It's right here.
Yeah.
I've been waiting for that, Jay. I'm waiting for your Tonewerk video.
Yeah,
Sorry,
exactly.
please go ahead.
Me too.
No, this is. See, I bought one as well. Anyway, we can get into that in a second. But on the one hand, we want manufacturers to listen, and I work with a lot of people. I have a lot of beta stuff, and I've got Fader Punk here. I've been playing with it for a while. It's cool. I gave them some ideas. We fix bugs. Now, on the one hand, you could say, you're not getting paid to beta test their software. On the other hand, I'm making suggestions and it's getting better. But then on the other, when we look at something like Tonewerk, comes out and it's not quite there and there's bugs, and okay, there's some fairly fundamental bugs. But people get really, really almost into religious arguments about like whether or not this is acceptable. Whereas for a smaller manufacturer, like, say if After Later or Instro come out with something and they said, we're in a conversation with our consumers, they'd be hailed as visionaries in the space or something like that. So I'm curious, like, why is it that some makers can get away with this and others can't?
That's a great question. We might as well do the Electron thing, because Electron is an ecosystem, right? It has that same feeling as a Mac or something else, where you're not just learning, or you're not just using a device, you're learning a certain type of workflow and a certain type of so we were talking about this a little bit earlier, Mark, this idea of sort of sensory motor feedback, and sort of you turn a knob and you get a sound back. That is sort of true on the Electron, but it requires you to have one more button press, right? To go to the filter page, for example, before you feel the filter, or go to the effects page or whatever else. So because of that, there's like this buy-in in terms of your, what do we want to call it, your muscle memory, your buy-in in terms of how you've decided to work. And there's also, to be quite honest, a price point buy-in, right? You are buying into a very expensive piece of gear. And so, yeah, you're right that some people do get just pretty ripped apart. I'm of two minds of it. I am of the age, and I suspect looking around here that we all are, that like, I'm of the age where I remember a VCR didn't need a firmware update, or your toaster didn't need a firmware update, or, and I'm still a big believer in that like a product should come out. And as Stu has heard me talk about many times on the Discord, I hate firmware updates. I hate updating, especially on a module. I love that they exist, and I love that they happen, but I hate it. I hate I hate having to do it, especially when the USB jack is on the back, or anyway.
Or it's micro USB.
Exactly.
Different kinds.
It's on the front of Proteus where it should be. Right
exactly.
there.
So on the front is a different.
Give me an SD card. Yeah. Give me an SD card or a front jack, and I'm fine. Yeah. Otherwise.
So when I think about I got. Stu and I both spent a small fortune on the Model D, a single voice, or a single voice synthesizer that just does the same thing it's been doing since the 1970s. And I don't know about you, Stu, but I'm entirely happy with my purchase.
I'm in love. Yeah. Jeffy and I were talking about this yesterday. Yeah. I didn't expect to love it. I knew I would enjoy it, but the layout,
exactly.
It's all right there. There's this factor that it's just fun.
It's hard to explain. And then you play the tone work, and I do feel like they should have taken their time. It sets new standards for the company that aren't necessarily the standards they want to set. I always use a piece of gear as if it's never going to get another firmware update, and that means that this is a piece of gear that sometimes just hard locks and crashes, that doesn't have preview options, that I don't know, that sometimes makes its parameter locks switch over to a different track instead, that causes all these weird random things. And I know they're going to clean it up, but it is now my new baseline for Electron, right? It's now how I'm going to think about this company until I no longer buy in on this company. Anyway, that's all I have to say. Yeah.
I think that's a really interesting point to make of it. You're only as good as your last performance, right? You're only as good as your last product, right? And that's how people measure you. So you can earn trust over a long period and lose it instantaneously, as we know.
Lose it very quickly.
I mean, if I didn't have bug testing from you guys, we wouldn't have the SynthDad mode on the Acidus Versio.
I love how he calls it SynthDad mode when it was actually me reading the manual wrong.
That's absurd.
Isn't that the synth thing of all? Yeah.
Yeah, well, that probably is the most, I suppose you could say that.
Jay, one of the things we talk about from time to time on this podcast is, are we musicians? Are we gear collectors? Are we experimenters? And I think, speaking for myself, I always wish I could make a finished track. I wish I could make more music. And I think some of us probably feel the same way. You actually do that. And so this is a question I asked you like 4 years ago. You and I had a conversation online once. So I'll ask it again because you're still doing it successfully. How do you organize your time? How do you make that work for you, given that you have a family and a job?
Yeah, I mean, if I can just back up a little bit before the organizational side, the biggest thing is, again, to give yourself permission to make the music you're making. And Stu, for you to say you're not making songs when you've made a ton of really, really lovely tracks that I've enjoyed on your channel, feels like it's you're not really being fair to yourself. You know what I mean? I don't mean this as like a therapy session. I just mean that like you have made music, and if that were all collected together as a record and I just pressed play on it and went and made my coffee and read my book, I would be like, this is really nice. This is really pleasing and pleasant. But the thing is that, and it's the same with mine, some songs you're going to be like, I would put that on an album. And some songs you're like, that was an interesting experiment and it's going to lead to good things, but it's not going to be part of an album. So for me, the vision is always that the album is the true piece of music. It's the statement. I'm of the era of VHSs and albums, right? So, but an album is the base unit length of a musical vision, in my opinion, right? And so every individual song is supposed to subserve it, but you don't know what's going to be part of the album, especially not when you're working with gear like we are. So I think if you were to collect a bunch of your ideas together, you'd find you have something really, really beautiful and really, really lovely. Anyway, on to the
Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. Honestly, your stuff's amazing. Again, you're the one who makes me think like, oh, I should go deeper on the Terra, or I should like figure out more about it. Anyway, to the organizational side, My partner and I, we have a kid. He's 9, and so I've been doing this all throughout his childhood. The biggest thing I would recommend for anyone who is a young synth dad, not like some of us older synth dads here, the biggest thing I would recommend is we got it from a parenting book or a pregnancy book or something. It's called Guerrilla Parenting. It's this idea that essentially, you will have times when you as a whole family are together, but it's like in our family on Saturday is Dadder Day, right? I spend the entire day with my kid. My partner can do whatever she needs to do. She gets everything she needs done. And then Sunday is my day that I can be doing, like I'm here right now, right in the studio, and I'm going to make music all day. And so the other side of it is that it's, Jeffy, maybe you felt this before, where it's like you get to the studio and you're like, now I've got a bunch of time and I'm miserable and I don't want to make a single thing.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I've definitely been there. I was there a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah. So the trick for me, I was there, I was feeling it just September to December is my busy semester. I still measure my life in semesters like many of us in academia do. Anyway, this has been brutal, and I had the tone work on the table, and I'm like, oh God, I don't want to do this. There's just so much inertia. But I just, sometimes you have a beautiful piece. Like I just give myself permission. On those days, Stu, I take down the Model D and I just, I'm not recording. I'm just making lovely sounds. And then that leads to something. I got lucky with the tone work. I played it for a half hour and I stumbled on the song. And then once I was chasing the song, it was there. But mainly it's just this sort of very careful or regimented sort of organizational idea about parenting, that you have times that are cohesive family times, but also that you don't let your free time smear into like get mixed up with your responsibilities, your domestic responsibilities. Yeah.
I have a thought that relates to this, and actually, there's a professor at University of British Columbia where Jay is, named Kalina Christoph, and she was on another podcast that I have about neuroscience and film, and she studies creativity, and one of the interesting things about her work is that she shows how creative people flip-flop back and forth between these two states, one where it's just kind of open and you're flowing and having ideas, and then there's another part of it which is a kind of deliberate editing, putting things together,
Yes.
sort of thing. And I know when I was first making electronic music, a lot of it was just this flowing stuff, the kind of thing that I might throw on an Instagram video. It's not necessarily an edited song that has a middle and an end to it. It's just kind of a bunch of pleasant sounds. And I made a bunch of tracks like that. But then I think as I started to make that stuff, my standards started to increase over time.
Yes.
And now I'm not
Yeah.
satisfied with that anymore. And the music that I feel like I have to make now would require more of the kind of editing mind. And that's less easy to do. It's less pleasurable. It does require some kind of like self-control where you're like, okay, I got to sit down and do this part now. And so I feel like I haven't made enough finished tracks lately because of that, because I'm not as sort of willing to get into that side of it. I just want to have fun and make sounds.
I think it's fair that you might also just be at that stage of life where a lot of what you're collecting are kind of open, sketchy kind of music. It's still music. It's still legitimate. I still listen to that kind of music all the time. I don't know about you all, but I listen to a lot of really stuff that isn't super structured, and it's wonderful, right? It's funny you mentioned Kalina's stuff because it ties in, no matter what your opinion is on him, it ties in really nicely to Rick Rubin's book on creativity. And I don't know if anybody's read The Creative Act.
Yeah.
I'm not a huge fan of all the music that Rick Rubin has made, but I am a fan of some of it. And I think that he does a very good job of reminding you that like an artist is first a person who loves art and listens to art. And also an artist is a person who observes the world. You walk around like an antenna, just picking up signals from the world. And that's the early sort of stages is just being a receiver and then trying to turn that into something you enjoy or that is fun or that is free flowing. And then you're right, exactly, Jonas. Eventually you need to switch over to this sort of much more meticulous cultivating mind. For me, I find that I maximize the fun. I'm always, Stu has heard this so many times. I'm sorry, Stu. But like the fun is everything. The fun is paramount. If it isn't fun, then what am I even doing making music? Because that's literally the whole point. I love the artistic vision, but like, honestly, you can't make an artistic vision unless you love the process. So it's all fun. And then at the very end, that level of fun and that feeling I captured is enough to push me into the editing and push me into doing a proper mix with multi-band compression and proper limiting. And that's what gets me through it. But I'll tell you that that side gets faster and faster for me. Like I spend less and less time mixing now, less and less time on the sort of last stages and more time just having fun. Yeah.
And this was your message on the Solar 42 video you did on Bo Beats' series, right? That was wonderful.
Yeah, music is play. Music's supposed to be play. We're supposed to be having fun and playing. And remember when we, like, I don't know about all you, but I learned guitar and it was like, oh my God, I can play a song from the beginning to the end. I just pick it up and I go. That's what I want to do on my synthesizers. I want to start it, open up the filter and just let the whole thing happen. And then at the end, I close the filter and the song is done, you know? I love that feeling.
Yeah, I think it's a great thing to emphasize, especially for most of us who are not doing it as any kind of a job or a living. You know, we have the advantage of not having to worry about that and can just treat it as a form of play, which is really
just
what it is.
Fulfilling your artistic vision and your sense of play. Yeah, exactly.
Mylar Melodies has a great recent video on this very subject. Just a few weeks ago, he put it out, kind of also answering my question, Jay, about people who are beating themselves up for not making full tracks. And he talks about felt great. He talks about if you're sitting at home and noodling and doing it for the love and not recording it, in a way that's even a higher echelon of artistic purity, right? Which is a really nice way of making tired dads feel good about their
making it for consumption, but just to make it.
That's right.
So we're coming up on an hour here. Does anybody have any questions that they're still harboring for Jay?
Yeah, I appreciate your carving out Sunday as a day to make music. It's an idea.
Do you have something like that, Jeffy? Like some clearly delineated borders?
I don't, and that's I think one of my problems. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Also, the new mixer was a problem because because you get the new mixer, you unplug everything, and then it was like, oh no, now I have to plug everything in.
Or you
while.
Don't. And my mixer's right here. It's got just what I need for this particular jam. Mm-hmm. So it's got 6 cables plugged in right now, and the mixer is otherwise just and this microphone, of course. But yeah,
when I said mixer, I meant mixers.
Okay.
Jeffy has 2 of everything.
Minimum.
I don't have 2 of these, but I have 2 of the same mixer. I've got
Jay, I want to say thank you. This felt, I was not expecting this to feel in a great way like a group therapy session with you kind of helping us out and reminding us to get the joy. I really needed it personally, so thank you. Alex usually kind of leads us out with where you can find us. I have no idea. YouTube, Instagram, any other. Jonas, you want to take it away?
I'll slap our Instagram stuff up there on the screen. But yeah, no, I just want to reiterate that this has been really great to have you on, Jay, and thank you for coming and sharing some of your time with us. And
it's been a real pleasure. Yeah. Thank you all. This has been amazing.
Thanks for joining us.
This is the conversation fantastic. I don't get to have, like that we have to have across continent, right? Yeah.
Right.
I know. But it's also pretty special that we get to pull in people from 3 different countries here and have this. So it's wonderful.
Definitely.
All right. We'll see you all next time. We got plenty more episodes coming up. Lots of other special guests in the bag. So join us on our podcast, subscribe wherever I'm going to put that, and we'll see you next time.
You're pointing to the thing.
I pointed to the thing.
Thanks, everybody.